The galaxy was vast, filled with countless stars and civilizations older than the memory of Earth. To many species in the Alliance, humans were still newcomers, young, reckless, and emotional. They had only joined the Council a decade ago, but already whispers followed them in every chamber. Fragile, unpredictable, expendable. Captain Mara Vey stood inside the Great Hall of Xylar Prime, the shining capital of the Intergalactic Alliance. The ceiling of the council chamber glowed, with starlight, each point representing a living world. Around her, alien leaders sat upon high platforms, their faces cold and unreadable. Mara's heart pounded, but her gaze stayed steady. She had come to fight for her people's place in the galaxy. The session began with grim news. Scouts had reported the movement of the Krith Dominion, a warlike race with ships shaped like razors of black metal. The Krith had destroyed entire systems before, leaving nothing but ashes in the void. Now their fleets were moving toward Alliance borders again. A heavy silence followed the report. Then Chancellor Vorix, a towering reptilian leader, slammed, his clawed hand upon the table. "We must prepare our defenses," he growled. "But the humans, they will not be needed. Their fleets are small. Their technology is outdated. They will only slow us down." Mara clenched her fists at his words, but forced her voice to stay calm. "Earth will not stand aside while the galaxy burns. We have fought wars before. We will fight again." Laughter rippled through the chamber. A slender insectoid minister clicked her mandibles. "Your kind barely learned to cross the stars. You are children playing with fire. This is not your war." Mara felt the sting of their dismissal, yet she refused to yield. "When your fleets fail," she said firmly, "remember who offered to stand." Her words echoed, but no one answered. The council turned away from her, already moving to other matters. To them, humanity's voice was little more than a whisper. Far from the council's glittering towers, on the edge of known space, young pilot Jonas Hale prepared his fighter. The hangar of the ISS Resolute shook with activity as mechanics scrambled over hulls and loaded weapons. Jonas sat in his cockpit staring out at the dark stars. He was only 24, born long after Earth had joined the Alliance. To him, aliens were not myths. They were comrades, rivals, sometimes even enemies. But today, he felt the weight of history pressing on his shoulders. The Krith were coming. Everyone knew it. And yet, the Alliance command had dismissed human. Fleets to simple patrols, treating them like children guarding a playground. Jonas's voice crackled over the comms. "Captain Vey, do you think they're right about us? That we're too small to matter?" From the bridge, Mara answered, her voice steady. "They see us as fragile, but fragility can also mean flexibility. They underestimate what we can do with little. And that," she said firmly, "will be their mistake." Jonas smiled faintly. She always had that calm fire in her. It was why the crew trusted her, even when the rest of the galaxy laughed at them. Night fell on Xylar Prime, though. The city never slept. Towers of crystal rose into the skies, glowing like lanterns. Mara stood on a balcony staring at the horizon. She thought of Earth, the blue oceans, the green fields, the laughter of her family far away. It was so fragile compared to these massive alien worlds. And yet she believed Earth carried something the others had forgotten, the will to fight, against impossible odds. Her thoughts were broken by the arrival of Aaron, a young Xylar officer assigned as liaison to the humans. His scaled skin shimmered faintly in the moonlight. "Captain," he said softly, "you should not have spoken against the Chancellor today. He will not forget." "I don't care," Mara replied. "The Krith won't wait for politics. If no one else stands, then humanity will." Erin studied her for a long moment. Your people are strange. You fight not only with weapons, but with stubbornness. Perhaps that will be needed." Mara allowed herself a small smile. Strange is just another word for different, and sometimes different is what wins. Beyond the borders, the Krith Dominion gathered. Their warships, sleek and dark, cut across the stars like predators. In their command ship, Overlord Koresh watched the holographic map. His cold eyes gleamed as he pointed toward the Alliance systems. Their fleets are scattered. Their leaders are divided. We will strike fast, and their worlds will fall. One of his commanders bowed. "And the humans, my lord? Shall we crush them first?" Koresh's lip curled into something like a smile. "Humans? They are nothing. Their kind will beg for mercy before the end." Back aboard the Resolute, Mara gathered her officers. "We may not have their numbers. We may not have their weapons. But we have something the Krith will never understand. We fight not just to survive, but for each other, for every family waiting at home, for every world that still dreams of peace." Her crew nodded, eyes burning with determination. Jonas leaned forward. "Then let's show them what fragile really means." And in that moment, humanity's destiny began to change. The stars stretched endless and silent, yet everyone on the ISS Resolute felt the weight of an unseen storm. Rumors of the Krith invasion grew each day. Traders whispered about vanished ships. Refugees arrived from frontier worlds, their faces pale with fear. The galaxy was holding its breath, waiting for the first strike. Captain Mara Vey stood on the bridge, staring at the tactical screen. Dots marked the positions of scattered human patrol ships, fragile beads of light against the darkness. Around them, the much larger fleets of alien allies waited in fortified sectors. But none of those fleets trusted humans to stand at the front. They were pushed to the edges, observers, not defenders. Yet Mara knew the Krith would not care about such divisions. When war came, no world would be safe. In the hangar, Jonas Hale polished the wings of his fighter. The ship was old, patched with mismatched panels, its engines loud and temperamental. Other pilots joked that it was more scrap than steel. But to Jonas, it was home. "Why are you smiling at that bucket of bolts?" teased Rena Torres, the squadron engineer, as she wiped grease from her hands. Jonas chuckled. "Because when this old bird flies, she sings. The Krith won't know what hit them." Rena shook her head but smiled. "You're either brave or foolish. Maybe both," Jonas replied softly, his eyes drifting to the stars. On Xylar Prime, the Alliance Council held another emergency meeting. The chamber buzzed with fear as reports confirmed the Krith had destroyed 2 minor outposts. The images flashed across the room. Burning wreckage, broken stations, drifting bodies. "We must send our strongest fleets immediately," demanded Chancellor Vorix, his deep voice echoing. "Our advanced ships will crush them before they gain ground." "But they learn," whispered an insectoid minister. "Each time they fight, they adapt." Mara, allowed to sit at the edge of the chamber, raised her voice. "Then you will need unpredictability. You will need humans." The council scoffed. One alien delegate hissed, "Your kind is reckless. You fight like fire, bright but short-lived." Mara met their eyes with calm strength. Fire can burn, fire can spread, and fire can save. The hall fell silent for a moment, but in the end, her words were ignored. Orders were sent, fleets prepared, but humans were left with patrol duty once again. That night, Mara returned to the Resolute heavy with frustration. She stood alone on the observation deck, watching the glowing horizon of Xylar Prime. For a moment, she allowed her guard to fall. Her hands trembled slightly as she thought of Earth, her family, her home oceans, her mother's voice across the radio. she whispered to herself, "If they will not trust us, then we must trust ourselves." Behind her, footsteps echoed. It was Irin, the Xylar officer who had shown her kindness before. His scaled skin reflected the starlight. "They will not listen," he said quietly. "No," Mara agreed. "But when the Krith strike, they will. Remember who warned them." Irin studied her face. "You humans, your strength is not in numbers or weapons. It is in your hearts. Perhaps the galaxy has forgotten what that means." Mara gave him a faint smile. "Then it's time to remind them." On the edge of Alliance space, the first real clash came. Krith ships descended on a mining colony, their black hulls glowing with crimson light. The colony had no defenses, only desperate distress calls. The alien fleets hesitated. Their admirals argued over tactics, afraid of traps. By the time they moved, it was too late. But the Resolute had already changed course. Mara gave the order without waiting for approval. "Set engines to maximum." "We answer that call." Her crew stared at her. "Captain, that's suicide," warned her second officer. "Maybe," Mara said firmly. "But those people need us, and if humanity can't protect even one colony, then what are we worth?" The Resolute leapt into hyperspace, alone against the storm. The battle was chaos. Krith destroyers tore through the skies, blasting mining platforms into fireballs. Civilians screamed across the comms. The Resolute emerged in the middle of it all, a single fragile ship against a swarm of predators. Jonas's voice rang through the comm. "Squadron, on me! Let's make them bleed!" Fighters launched from the hangar like sparks from a flame. They swirled through the Krith formation, darting between their massive hulls. Plasma beams cut the dark, but Jonas and his squad danced through them, reckless and wild. "Target their engines!" Jonas shouted. "Make them chase us where they can't aim!" Rena's fighter streaked past, releasing mines that clung to a Krith cruiser before exploding. The massive ship shuddered, drifting helplessly. Cheers erupted over comms, but Mara's voice cut through. "Stay sharp! This isn't over!" The Krith regrouped, turning their heavy cannons toward the lone human ship. The Resolute shook violently as beams struck its shields. Panels burst into flame. Alarm screamed. But Mara stood unflinching. "Divert all power to forward shields," she commanded. "Helm, take us straight through their formation." Her officers stared at her in shock. "Straight through? That's madness!" Mara's eyes blazed. "Exactly. That's why it will work." With engines roaring, the Resolute plunged into the heart of the Krith fleet. Fighters swirled in its wake, weaving chaos. The Krith, unprepared for such reckless defiance, faltered. And, in that brief window, hundreds of miners escaped in shuttles, guided to safety by human pilots. When the battle finally ended, the Resolute was scarred and smoking, but alive. 2 Krith ships burned in pieces, destroyed by sheer human audacity. The colony had been saved, not by the mighty fleets of the Mai Alliance, but by one stubborn human ship that refused to back down. Back on the bridge, Mara allowed herself a tired smile. "They think we're weak," she said softly. "Let them keep thinking it." Jonas, covered in sweat and ash, laughed over the comms. "If this is weakness, I'd hate to see us strong." The crew erupted in laughter, exhausted but victorious. Away in the dark halls of his flagship, Overlord Koresh heard of the defeat. His eyes narrowed. "Humans," he whispered. "So the fire still burns." And for the first time, the Krith Dominion felt unease. The Resolute drifted back into safe space, scarred but unbroken. Its hull bore the black marks of battle, and entire decks still smelled of smoke. Yet within those damaged walls, hearts burned brighter than ever. The crew had done the impossible. They had stood against the Krith and won. But triumph carried a heavy shadow. In the medical bay, nurses rushed between rows of wounded. Men and women lay on stretchers, their uniforms scorched, their eyes half closed with exhaustion. Jonas Hale sat by the bed of his wingmate Rena Torres. Her arm was wrapped in bandages, her face pale. "You shouldn't have flown so close to that cruiser," Jonas said softly. Rena managed a weak smile. "And missed the chance to scare the Krith?" "Never," Jonas laughed, though his throat tightened. Behind his humor, fear lingered. Each battle felt like rolling dice with fate. How many more would they survive? On the bridge, Captain Mara Vey faced the quiet hum of damaged systems. Irin, the Xylar liaison, stood beside her. He had stayed after the battle, watching the humans with an expression that carried both wonder and confusion. "You saved them," he said at last. "An entire colony, when the rest of the Alliance only argued." Mara's voice was calm but sharp. "We did what anyone should have done." Irin tilted his head, his scaled features glimmering under the dim lights. "No, not anyone. Other races would have waited for orders. You moved without them. You risked everything, knowing you might fail." Mara turned to him, her eyes steady. "Sometimes the right choice is the hardest one. Humanity has learned that lesson many times." For a moment, Irin was silent. Then, he whispered almost to himself, "Perhaps you are not as fragile as we thought." News of the Resolute's stand spread faster than fire across dry fields. On distant worlds, civilians whispered about the humans who defied the Krith. Some mocked, calling it a lucky miracle. Others admired the courage. But everywhere, the story planted a seed. Maybe humanity was more than what the Council believed. Inside the Alliance chambers, the mood was less forgiving. Chancellor Vorix roared in anger when he heard Mara had acted without permission. "They disobeyed orders. They endangered themselves and others." His claws scraped the table. "But they succeeded," Irin argued carefully. "The colony, lives because of them." Vorix's eyes blazed. "Luck will not save us in a real war." Still, doubt had entered the Council. For the first time, alien leaders began to wonder, what if the humans had something the others lacked? "Far from politics," the Krith Dominion seethed. Overlord Koresh stood before a vast star map, his voice sharp with fury. "One ship," he hissed. "One fragile human ship has dared to wound us." His generals shifted uneasily. "It was unexpected, my lord." Their tactics were wild, without reason. "Not without reason," Koresh corrected. "Without pattern. They fight like beasts, not machines. But beasts can be dangerous when cornered." His gaze darkened as he turned to his fleet. "Send a message. Find the humans. Break them so the galaxy sees their weakness. Leave nothing behind but ashes." The Krith war drums began to beat, and the storm grew closer. On the Resolute, the crew prepared for what they knew would come. Repairs were rushed. Engines groaned. Weapons were patched with salvaged parts, yet spirits remained unshaken. Jonas stood on the hangar deck, watching mechanics fix his battered fighter. His friend Rena limped toward him, still weak but determined. "You should rest," Jonas told her. "And you should stop worrying," she shot back. "We survived one fight, we'll survive the next." Jonas sighed, then grinned. "You're impossible." "That's what makes us human," Rena replied with a spark in her eyes. Late one night, Mara walked the quiet corridors of the ship. She paused at the viewing port, gazing at the endless black of space. Her reflection stared back, tired eyes, a face carved by both fear and hope. She thought of her crew, of Jonas's laughter, of Rena's stubbornness, of Earth's fragile beauty. Each memory reminded her why she could not fail. Irin approached quietly, his voice low. "Do you ever fear death?" Mara looked at him, then back to the stars. "Every day." But fear reminds us what we stand to lose. It keeps us fighting. He studied her in silence, as if trying to understand something alien yet profound. At last, he said, "Perhaps humanity's weakness is its greatest strength." The calm did not last. Alarms blared across the Resolute. Sensors screamed. Krith. Fleet incoming. The bridge erupted in activity. Officers shouted coordinates, weapons powered up, fighters scrambled. The black void ahead filled with crimson light as Krith's ships tore through hyperspace, their numbers overwhelming. Jonas's heart raced as he slid into his cockpit. Rena's voice echoed over comms, fierce despite her wounds. "Let's show them the last fight wasn't luck." Mara stood at the center of the bridge, her voice steady and strong. "They think we'll break. They think we're nothing. Prove them wrong." The Krith fleet closed in, their war drums echoing across the void. The battle for survival was about to begin. On his flagship, Overlord Koresh leaned forward, eyes burning with hatred. "Crush them," he ordered, "and let the galaxy watch as humanity dies." But deep inside, a whisper of unease stirred. The humans had survived once, and Koresh knew, though he would never admit it, that fire had a way of spreading. And so the storm finally struck, with humanity standing at its fragile, burning heart. The void roared with light. Krith warships poured from hyperspace, their black hulls glowing with crimson fire. They moved like blades cutting through the dark, surrounding the Resolute in a deadly net. The alarms on board screamed, red lights, flashing across every corridor. Captain Mara Vey stood tall at the center of the bridge, her eyes fixed on the growing swarm. Fear pressed at the edges of her mind, but she would not let it show. Her crew looked to her for strength, and she would not fail them. "Shields at maximum," she ordered. "All weapons ready. Fighters, launch immediately." The ship shook as the first wave of enemy fire struck. Blue shields flared, bending but not breaking. The Resolute groaned like a living beast under strain. In the hangar, Jonas Hale strapped himself into his fighter. His heart hammered, but his hands were steady. He glanced at Rena Torres, who was climbing into her own battered craft. She was pale, still wounded from the last battle, but her eyes burned with stubborn fire. "You are sure about this?" Jonas called over the comm. Rena smirked, her voice rough but firm. "I didn't fix this bird just to watch from the sidelines. Let's make them bleed." With a thunderous roar, the fighters launched into space. They streaked forward like sparks, from a flame, weaving between the giant Krith warships. The void exploded with light as weapons fired. The Krith fought with cold precision, their ships moving in rigid formations. But the humans fought differently. Jonas dove between two cruisers, his fighter twisting wildly as beams tore past him. He launched 2 missiles at close range, blasting through the enemy's engines. "They're too rigid," Jonas shouted over comms. "They can't react fast enough. Hit them where they can't turn." Rena whooped with laughter as she dropped. A mine cluster behind her. A pursuing destroyer collided with the trap, vanishing in a fiery cloud. "That's right," she yelled. "Chase us, you monsters!" The humans fought with instinct, with chaos, with reckless courage. And slowly, impossibly, the Krith formations began to falter. On the bridge of the Resolute, Mara watched the battle unfold. Her ship trembled as beams raked across its shields, but her eyes were sharp. "They're trying to pin us," her officer reported. "If they surround us fully, we're finished." "Then we don't let them surround us," Mara replied. "Helm, take us through their center." The crew froze. "Through the center? Captain, that's suicide!" Mara's voice cut through the fear. "If we run, they'll hunt us down. If we stay, they'll crush us. But if we break their formation, just once, we'll remind them why they should fear us. With engines." Screaming, the Resolute surged forward. It plunged straight into the heart of the Krith fleet, cannons blazing. The Krith were caught off guard. Their ships, built for tight precision, struggled to adapt as the lone human vessel burst into their formation like a wild predator. Explosions ripped through the void as the Resolute's weapons fired at point-blank range. On his flagship, Overlord Koresh snarled as the chaos unfolded. "What are they doing? That maneuver is madness," his advisor hissed. "It makes no sense." "It makes sense to them," Koresh growled. "They do not fight with reason, they fight with fire." Back in the thick of the fight, Jonas pulled his fighter into a reckless spin, dodging beams that should have killed him. Sweat dripped into his eyes, but his grin was wild. "This is what we do, Rena," he shouted. "We don't follow their rules. We make our own." Rena's laughter echoed over comms, even as her fighter trailed smoke. "Then let's write the rules in blood." Together, they dove straight at a Krith battleship, weaving in and out of its massive cannons. The enemy struggled to track their movements. At the last second, Jonas fired his last missile into its reactor core. The explosion was blinding, ripping the giant ship apart. The Resolute shook violently. Sparks rained across the bridge as another blast tore into its side. Crew members were thrown from their seats. Alarms wailed, but Mara stood unbroken. "Damage report," she demanded. "Shields failing. Hull breaches on decks 3 and 4. Her officer cried. Mara gritted her teeth. They were bleeding, but they were not beaten. "Divert all remaining power to weapons. If we're going down, we're taking as many with us as we can." Her words filled the crew with fierce determination. They were more than soldiers now. They were defiance itself. As the battle raged, Erin stood quietly behind Mara. His alien eyes widened as he watched the humans fight. They were reckless, yes. Illogical, yes. But there was something terrifying about their refusal to surrender. "At last," he whispered, "you fight like a flame. You burn even when the wind tries to smother you." Mara gave a faint, tired smile. "That's humanity, Erin. We burn brightest when the darkness closes in." The tide began to turn. Krith ships burned, their formations shattered by unpredictable strikes. The humans had no grand strategy, no perfect plan, only instinct, courage, and unity. But that was enough. On his flagship, Koresh's fury shook the chamber. "One ship cannot stand against an empire," he roared. Yet in his heart, he felt something cold. For the first time, the Krith Dominion had met a foe they could not easily crush. When the smoke finally cleared, the void was littered with wreckage. The Resolute drifted among the ruins, scarred and battered, but still alive. The Krith had retreated, leaving behind the wrecks of their mighty warships. Inside the bridge, silence fell. Exhausted faces turned toward Mara. She looked at them all, her voice low but fierce. "They think we are weak. They think we are fragile. But tonight we showed them the truth." Jonas's tired laugh came over comms. "Fragile things don't break, they bend. And we just bent the galaxy." And though victory was uncertain, though war still loomed ahead, in that moment every soul aboard the Resolute believed. Humanity was no longer just a whisper in the stars. Humanity was a fire no storm could extinguish. The wreckage of battle still drifted like ghosts in the void. The Resolute limped back to Alliance space, its hull blackened, its crew bruised but alive. To the humans aboard, their defiance had been a victory. To the galaxy watching, it was a miracle. But in the marble halls of Xylar Prime, the story was not celebrated as triumph. Instead, it became fuel for arguments. The council chamber was filled with raised voices and flashing eyes. Some leaders praised the humans' courage. Others condemned their recklessness. Chancellor Vorik slammed his clawed hand against the table, his scaled crest trembling with fury. "They disobeyed orders. They endangered the fleet. They are dangerous not only to the Krith, but to us as well." Across from him, a feathered elder of the Aelari spread her wings in protest. "Dangerous? They saved a colony that we abandoned." "They fought when others hesitated," Vorik growled. "Luck, nothing more. The Krith will crush them in the next battle." In the shadows of the chamber, Captain Maravay stood silently. She had been summoned to hear judgment, not to speak. Her eyes moved over the faces of the council, cold, skeptical, afraid. It struck her that humanity's fight was not only against the Krith, but against doubt itself. Back on the Resolute, the crew tried to rest. Repairs filled the hangar with the sound of sparks and welding. The air smelled of burned metal, but laughter still echoed between the walls. They had survived, and survival itself felt like victory. Jonas Hale sat with Rena Torres near the observation deck. Her arm was still bandaged, her fighter riddled with holes, yet her grin never faded. "Do you think they'll ever admit it?" she asked quietly. "Admit what?" Jonas replied. "That we're not weak, that we belong here." Jonas gazed out at the endless stars. "Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but every time we fight, we carve our place a little deeper." Rena leaned back, her voice softer now. "Then let's keep carving." Erin, the Xylar liaison, walked the corridors of the human ship with quiet wonder. Everywhere he turned, he saw things no alien fleet possessed. Pilots laughing even after battle, engineers singing as they worked, wounded soldiers still cracking, jokes through their pain. When he returned to his quarters, he recorded a message for his people. His voice was calm, but his words carried weight. "The humans are unlike any race we know. They are fragile in body, yet unshakable in spirit. If we turn our backs on them, we may lose the one fire that can stand against the Krith." He paused, hesitating before adding, "Perhaps the Council is blind. Perhaps they fear what they cannot control." Meanwhile, in the dark chambers of the Krith flagship, Overlord Koresh listened to reports of defeat. His generals shifted nervously, afraid. To meet his burning gaze, "One ship," Koresh hissed. "One human ship humiliated us." A commander bowed low. "The humans fight without logic, my lord. Their tactics are chaos. Silence!" Koresh thundered. His clawed hand struck the metal table, leaving a dent. "Chaos is no excuse. If they are chaos, then we will become order. We will crush them not with speed, but with weight." He pointed to the star map glowing before him. "Summon the Harbinger fleet. We will strike not at their ships, but at their spirit. Burn their worlds. Break their hope. Let them see what true power means." The chamber trembled with the sound of war drums. The Krith would not rest until humanity was ashes. Days later, Mara was summoned once again to the council. The great chamber glowed with starlight, yet the mood was dark. Rumors whispered of betrayal, of secret deals, of leaders willing to sacrifice weaker members of the Alliance for their own survival. Vorix's voice cut through the silence. "Captain Vey, your people have proven unpredictable. Some here believe humans may even provoke greater danger. If your fleets continue to act without order, we may have no choice but to restrict your movement." The words struck like a blade. Mara's chest tightened, but she stood tall. "Restrict us? When we are the only ones standing against the Krith? You would chain the fire while the darkness spreads?" Murmurs filled the chamber. Some nodded in agreement, others scowled. Erin stepped forward, his voice steady. "You call them reckless. But I have seen them fight with my own eyes. Reckless does not save lives. Reckless does not hold the line against impossible odds. What you fear is not recklessness. It is their refusal to surrender." Vorix's eyes blazed. "You defend them too strongly. Do you forget what is at stake? If humanity sparks a larger war, the blame will fall on all of us." Mara met his gaze without flinching. "The war has already begun. Blame will not save you. Only courage will." That night, Mara walked alone through the glowing streets of Xylar Prime. The towers shimmered like crystal spires, but she felt no peace. The whispers of betrayal were real. Some leaders were preparing to bargain with the Krith, offering border worlds in exchange for safety. She stopped on a bridge overlooking the endless lights. Her reflection stared back, weary but unbroken. Jonas's voice echoed in her memory. Every time we fight, we carve our place a little deeper. Mara clenched her fists. Humanity's place would not be given. It would be earned, carved in fire, in sacrifice, in defiance. Far above, hidden in the cold dark, Krith ships began to gather. Their engines glowed red, their shadows stretched long. The storm was not over. It was only waiting to strike again. And deep inside, humanity prepared to face not only the enemy before them, but the doubt and betrayal that lurked behind. The war was no longer about survival alone. It was about proving to the galaxy that fragile did not mean weak, and that fire once lit could never be caged. The warning came like thunder in the night. Sensors lit up across the edge of Alliance space, red lines sweeping across the maps. The Krith were moving, not small raids, not testing strikes, but a wave of warships so vast that it looked like the stars themselves had turned against the galaxy. On the Resolute, alarms wailed through every corridor. Crew members sprinted to their stations, the echo of boots clashing with the hum of engines powering up. Captain Mara Vey stood on the bridge, her jaw set, eyes fixed on the tactical screen. Jonas Hale read the numbers out loud, his voice tight. 40 warships, no, 60, and more still coming out of hyperspace. This isn't a fleet, it's a storm. Mara didn't blink. Then we'll learn how to stand in the storm. Far away, on Xylar Prime, the Alliance Council fell into panic. The chamber erupted into chaos. Leaders shouted, wings flared, claws slammed against the marble table. "There are too many," one alien delegate shrieked. "If we fight, we'll lose everything." Vorix, the scaled chancellor, rose with a cold smile. "Perhaps we need not fight. The Krith only want expansion. If we yield a few human colonies, perhaps they will be satisfied." The words struck like knives. Erin, the Xylarian liaison who had traveled with the humans, stood in outrage. His feathers trembled with anger. "You would sell them like bargaining chips. Do you not see? The Krith will never stop. Today it is humans, tomorrow it will be your people." But many leaders turned away, fear drowning reason. For them, safety mattered more than honor, and so whispers of betrayal grew louder. Back in orbit, the Krith descended. Fire spilled from their cannons, painting the void red. Entire patrol fleets were swept aside, their ships breaking like glass, under the sheer force of the onslaught. On the Resolute, the crew braced as shockwaves rattled the hull. Torres shouted from her fighter bay, "We can't hold them! There are too many!" Mara's voice cut through the fear, sharp and steady. "Listen to me. Numbers don't win battles. Hearts do. We'll fight with everything we have. If we fall, let it be known we did not bend." Her words echoed across the comms, and something stirred in every heart. The humans knew their chances were slim, but still, they stood ready. The battle began. Fighters roared into the black, weaving through the massive Krith ships like sparks dancing in a storm. Torres led the charge, her wounded fighter patched but fierce. She darted between cruisers, releasing volleys that tore holes in the enemy's shields. Jonas commanded the gunnery decks, his hands flying across controls. Plasma fire burst from the Resolute, striking where the Krith least expected. The humans did not fight with precision alone. They fought with unpredictability, with courage, with fury, with instinct that no machine could calculate. They made the void itself feel alive. But the Krith pressed harder. Wave after wave came, relentless and merciless. One by one, Alliance. Ships faltered, retreating into the darkness. On the bridge, Mara received the report. "The Elari have withdrawn. The Drakthar fleet refuses to engage. We are alone." For a moment, silence filled the bridge. Betrayal had become reality. Mara's Hands clenched around the command chair. Her voice was steady, but inside her chest burned with fire. Then humanity will show the galaxy what it means to be alone. The Resolute fought like a wounded beast, its hull cracking, its lights flickering. Yet, it did not fall. Every time, the Krith thought the humans were finished. Another strike came. Another torpedo. Another daring maneuver. Another impossible act of defiance. Torres's voice burst through comms, wild with adrenaline. "They can't predict us! They don't know how we fight!" Jonas laughed bitterly. "That's because even we don't know how we fight." And somehow, that chaos became their strength. But then came the Harbinger. It was not just a ship. It was a mountain of steel, bristling with cannons, its engines burning like suns. Larger than any human city, it moved into the battle with crushing weight. The Krith fleet gathered behind it, their confidence reborn. The bridge fell silent as it appeared on the screen. Even Mara felt her breath catch. Jonas whispered, "That thing could break a planet." Mara straightened. "Then let's make sure it remembers us." The Resolute charged. Against all reason, against all fear, it dove toward the Harbinger. Fighters followed in formation, human ships burning bright against the dark. The Krith opened. Fire, their cannons tearing through the void. Explosions lit up space, debris scattering like ashes. But still, the humans pressed forward. Every second felt endless. Every heartbeat was a lifetime. Rena Torres shouted, "For Earth! For every world they've tried to take!" Her fighter slammed into a squadron, clearing the path for the Resolute. The ship surged closer to the Harbinger, its hull shuddering under fire. Systems screamed warnings, but Mara refused to slow. "We've come this far," she said softly. "We will not stop now." At the last moment, Jonas's eyes widened. "Captain, the Harbinger's shields. They're not perfect. There's a gap just above the forward cannon array." Mara's voice rang out like thunder. "All weapons! Fire everything!" The Resolute unleashed its fury. Torpedoes, plasma, railguns, every weapon roared at once, striking the gap Jonas had seen. The Harbinger shuddered. Light burst from its wounded hull. The impossible had been done. One human ship had cracked the monster. The crew cheered, their cries filled with fire and hope. For the first time, the Krith wavered, but victory did not come cheap. The Resolute was barely holding together, its decks aflame, its shields gone. One more direct hit would tear it apart. Mara stood tall, her eyes blazing. She knew the battle was not just about survival. It was about showing the galaxy what humanity was made of. "Transmit to all frequencies," she ordered. "Let the galaxy hear us." Her voice carried into the void, fierce and unyielding. "We are humanity. You may break our bodies. You may burn our worlds. But you will never silence our spirit. We will fight even when left alone. And we will not fall quietly." Across the galaxy, millions heard her words. Some wept, some trembled, and some, in hidden corners of space, began to believe that maybe the humans were the spark the galaxy had been waiting for. The battle was not over. The Harbinger still loomed, but for the first time, the stars themselves seemed to burn with the fire of human defiance. The stars still burned with fire from the clash, but silence fell over the Resolute's bridge. The crew stared at the screen, watching the massive Krith warship, the Harbinger, smolder from the blow they had delivered. It was wounded, but not destroyed. Its dark hull shone like a broken mountain drifting in the void. Captain Mara Vey stood in the center, her uniform torn, her face marked by smoke and sweat. Her eyes, however, were fierce. She whispered, almost to herself, "We made it bleed." "Now it knows us." Jonas Hale, still at his console, wiped blood from his temple. "But Captain, we barely stand. Another strike and we'll be space dust." Mara's gaze moved across her people, each tired, each broken, but none surrendering. Then we fight until the last spark, because if we fall, we teach them why humanity is feared, not forgotten. The crew nodded. Their breaths were heavy, but their hearts were iron. Far away in the Alliance Council chamber, betrayal spread like poison. The scaled Chancellor Vorix leaned forward, his reptilian eyes gleaming. The humans have bought us time. Let their sacrifice hold the Krith while we secure our own borders. Gasps filled the chamber. Some delegates protested, wings flaring or tendrils quivering with anger. But many remained silent. Fear ruled. Them, Erin, the Xylarian who had grown close to the humans, rose in fury. His voice shook the hall. You would abandon them after they bled for us? Do you not see? Their courage is the shield that protects us all. But his words fell into the hollow silence of cowards, and so the humans fought alone. On the battlefield, the Harbinger stirred. Its wounded hull cracked open, glowing rivers of molten steel spilling out. Then, with a terrible roar, it began to charge its main cannon. Energy gathered in its core, a sun being born in its chest. Jonas's screen flashed red. Captain, it's preparing a super blast. If it fires, not just us, but half the sector will be erased. The bridge froze. Fear, heavy and suffocating, settled over them. Mara closed her eyes for a moment. She thought of Earth's blue skies, of oceans stretching endless, of children laughing under broken city ruins yet still finding hope. She thought of every sacrifice, every name, every dream carried into the stars. Her eyes opened. And they burned. No, she said firmly. We'll stop it, no matter the cost. In the fighter bay, Rena Torres climbed into her battered ship. Her arms trembled, but her spirit did not. She opened comms. Captain, give me one last run. I can distract them long enough for you to strike. Mara's voice was calm, but heavy with unspoken grief. Torres, you won't come back. Torres smiled faintly. I never expected to. But if my fire buys us one more chance, it's worth it. Tell my family. Tell them I flew to the stars for them. Her engines roared, and she shot into the void like a comet. The Krith unleashed swarms of fighters, metal beasts with glowing eyes. Torres cut through them like lightning, her movements wild, unpredictable. She drew the swarm away from the Resolute, her ship burning brighter with every strike she made. Inside the bridge, Jonas's voice broke. She's buying us time, Captain. We have one chance left. Mara nodded. Then let's not waste it. The Resolute surged forward, battered engines screaming. Jonas focused all weapons on the weak point they had uncovered before. Plasma. Cannons glowed, torpedo bays opened, railguns spun to life. But as they drew close, something strange happened. The Harbinger's hull shifted, folding like living flesh. From its cracks poured out dark, writhing forms, creatures of shadow, half metal, half organic. They swarmed into space, moving like liquid nightmares. Jonas's heart stopped. Captain, those aren't ships. They're alive. The Krith had unleashed their secret. Their warships were not only machines, but prisons for twisted bioweapons. The shadows fell upon the Resolute. They clung to the hull, clawing at the metal, forcing their way in. Alarms blared as breaches erupted across the decks. Crew members fought hand to hand in the corridors, human rifles blazing against inhuman shrieks. Smoke filled the air, screams echoing as the monsters tore through steel. Jonas slammed a bulkhead, shut, sealing one hallway. His face was pale but resolute. Captain, if they reach the core, we're finished. Mara's eyes narrowed. Then we fight them here. Every deck, every hall. This ship doesn't fall while we breathe. The battle turned into chaos. Humans fought with knives, with pipes, with their bare fists when ammo ran dry. They were bloodied, cornered, but unbroken. Every cry was one of defiance. Every breath was resistance. Erin, watching from a secret channel in the council chamber, saw it all through a hacked feed. His feathers trembled. His voice whispered in awe. They are not soldiers alone. They are fire. They are hope. In the fighter bay, Torres's voice cut in, ragged but fierce. Captain, I'm almost at their cannon core. I'll take it out myself. Before Mara could answer, a blinding light filled the stars. Torres's fighter struck the core, detonating in a burst that shook the void. The Harbinger staggered, its charging weapon collapsing in fire. The Krith roared in fury, their warship wounded again. But Torres was gone. The bridge fell silent, grief pressing heavy on every heart. Jonas lowered his head. She gave everything. Mara's voice was quiet, steady, carrying both sorrow and pride. No, she gave us a chance, and we will honor her. The shadows still clawed at the hull. The Resolute still burned. The Harbinger still loomed. But something had changed. Humanity had struck again, and survived. The Krith had expected fear. They had expected surrender. Instead, they had found a species that refused to kneel, that turned sacrifice into strength, that made even the stars tremble with their defiance. Mara raised her voice, carrying it across every channel, to friend and enemy alike. Listen well. You thought humanity fragile. You thought us weak. But we are the storm that rises when the night is darkest. We fight not for power but for each other, and that makes us stronger than you will ever understand. Across the galaxy, hidden allies stirred. Resistance fighters on distant worlds clenched their fists. Refugees whispered hope. Even in the halls of the council, the cowardly leaders felt shame. The humans stood alone. But they no longer felt alone, for their fire was spreading. As the Harbinger reeled, Mara looked at her crew, broken but unyielding. She saw in them what the Krith never could, an unbreakable spirit. The war was not over. The shadows still closed in, but the universe had seen the truth. Humanity would not vanish quietly. They would burn brighter than the stars. The Resolute drifted through the wreckage, scarred and bleeding, but still alive. Fires burned across its decks, and the wounded lay side by side, whispering prayers or calling out for loved ones. Yet even in that silence of pain, there was a heartbeat of defiance. Captain Mara Vey stood at the shattered viewing glass of the bridge. She looked out at the broken remains of Torres's fighter, scattered like falling stars. Her chest ached, but she did not let tears fall. Instead, her voice carried strength. She gave her life so we could stand another day. We will not waste her gift. Jonas Hale sat at his console, his fingers trembling. His face was pale, but his eyes burned. Captain, she stopped the cannon, but the Harbinger is still there. It's repairing itself. How can we fight something that heals faster than we can strike? Mara's answer came like steel. By refusing to break. Even if we cannot destroy it today, we will remind the galaxy what humans are. Far across the stars, the Alliance Council chamber echoed with silence. They had watched Torres's sacrifice through intercepted feeds, watched as one human ship stood against the monstrous Krith. But still, fear ruled them. Many leaders whispered that humanity would be destroyed, and their deaths would buy the galaxy more time. They told themselves it was logical, necessary. Yet one voice rose again. Irin, the Xylarian delegate, his feathers flaring with rage. Look at them! They stand while we cower. They give their lives while we hide behind excuses. Is this the unity we swore to uphold? Or have we already surrendered to the Krith without a fight? Some turned away. Others lowered their eyes in shame. But a few listened. Seeds of courage, small but dangerous, began to grow. Back on the Resolute, the shadow creatures still clawed at the hull. Corridors shook with battles. Crew members fought with rifles, blades, even bare hands. Blood stained the walls, Yet their cries were filled not with despair, but with fury. Lieutenant Kareen fell in the mess hall, surrounded by 3 shadow beasts. Before she could be torn apart, 2 engineers rushed in, wielding nothing but welding, torches and pipes. Together, they drove the monsters back. Humanity was fighting with every tool, every ounce of spirit, refusing to surrender a single inch of ground. Jonas reported from the bridge, "Hull integrity at 30%. If we take another direct strike, we won't hold." Mara's hands tightened on the railing. Her voice was calm but sharp. "Then we strike first." The Resolute turned toward the Krith warship once more. Smoke trailed from its broken engines, sparks burst from its weapons, yet it advanced like a wounded beast ready for its final hunt. The crew knew what this meant. This would be no slow retreat, no cautious maneuver. This was a charge. Jonas whispered under his breath, "God help us all." Then he shouted across the bridge, "Weapons ready! Shields at maximum!" Engines screamed, and the ship lunged forward. The Harbinger answered with a storm of fire. Crimson beams lanced across the void, tearing through debris, shaking the Resolute. But the humans did not turn back. They drove forward, into the heart of the storm. Inside the halls, the shadow creatures screamed louder, as if sensing their master's fury. Crew members held the lines, fighting with desperate courage. Every second bought by their blood pushed the ship closer to its target. Mara raised her hand. "Fire all batteries!" The void exploded with light. Plasma cannons struck the Harbingers. Wounds. Railguns ripped across its broken hull. Torpedoes streaked like falling stars, slamming into the beast's chest. The Krith ship howled, shaking under the rain of fire. For the first time, the monsters looked uncertain, but victory was not yet in reach. The Harbinger unleashed its swarm again, thousands of shadow forms pouring into space. They moved like a living tide, covering the stars, swallowing light. Jonas's face went pale. "Captain, there's too many. They'll crush us before we reach the core." The crew braced for death. But then, something changed. From the edge of the system, new signals appeared. Ships, small at first, then more, breaking through hyperspace. Like sparks across the night. They were not human. Erin's voice broke across the comms, filled with fire. "You are not alone, Captain Vey. Not anymore." The Xylarian fleet descended, wings of silver and blue. Behind them came smaller squadrons from other worlds, species that had broken from the Council's cowardice. They had seen humanity's courage and found their own. The tide shifted. The Krith swarm turned, shrieking as they met new resistance. Alien ships fired beside the Resolute, their beams piercing through shadow, their cannons lighting up the void. On the bridge, Jonas's voice cracked with disbelief. "They came? They actually came." Mara's lips curved into the faintest smile. They saw what one human ship could do. Now they believe what many can. Together, the fleets struck. The Harbinger staggered as blow after blow rained upon it. The Krith shrieked in rage, but their power was no longer absolute. Still, the battle was far from won. Even wounded, the Harbinger was monstrous, its dark core pulsing with unnatural energy. Shadow creatures still poured out, tearing ships apart, spreading chaos. But for the first time, humanity was not fighting alone. Taurus's sacrifice had become a flame. It had spread from ship to ship, from world to world, igniting something the Krith had not expected. Hope. And hope was dangerous. On the bridge, Mara raised her voice, carrying it across all allied channels. "Listen to me. We are bloodied, but we are not broken. Today we show the Krith that we will never bow. Stand with us, and together we will drive them into the dark." Across the stars, thousands of voices roared in answer. The battle raged, but the fire of unity had been born. They, resolute, once alone, now surged forward at the head of a fleet. Every shot, Every sacrifice, every heartbeat carried one truth. Humanity had awakened the galaxy. And though the war was far from over, the universe would never again see humans as weak. They had become the spark that lit the stars. The battlefield was a storm of fire and shadow. The Krith Harbinger still burned, its massive frame cracking under the united assault, but it did not fall. Instead, the monstrous ship unleashed a deeper horror. From its dark core, a wave of energy pulsed outward, swallowing light and bending space. Stars flickered. Allied ships twisted in the shockwave, some tearing apart as if invisible claws ripped them open. Panic spread across the fleet. On the Resolute, alarms screamed. Jonas clung to his console, shouting, "It's destabilizing space-time. If it spreads further, the whole system will collapse." Captain Mara Vey stood steady, her eyes locked on the black vortex blooming inside the Harbinger. It was more than a weapon. It was a wound in reality, a tear that could consume worlds. She whispered to herself, "So this is their true power." But, aloud, her voice was clear. "We hold the line. If we fall here, the galaxy falls with us." The Allied fleet fought desperately. Xylarian wings darted like blades of silver, cutting into shadow swarms. Draconian war cruisers hurled molten fire. Human ships, though fewer, struck with stubborn precision. Yet for every monster destroyed, more emerged from the vortex. Crew after crew screamed into the comms, begging for help, dying in flashes of light. Still, no one retreated. Humanity's fire had infected them all. In the mess hall of the Resolute, wounded soldiers leaned on one another, patching themselves with makeshift bandages, ready to pick up rifles again. Engineers who had never seen combat fought alongside Marines. Ordinary people did extraordinary things. One young ensign whispered, holding his bleeding side. "Why do we keep fighting?" An older medic answered, her hands trembling but firm. "Because we remember what it means to be alive." On the bridge, Jonas turned to Mara, his face pale. "Captain, if we destroy the Harbinger, the vortex might collapse. But if we fail, it could expand and take half the sector. What are your orders?" Mara's eyes softened as she looked at him. "Jonas, there are times when survival matters. And there are times when meaning matters more. This is one of those times." He nodded slowly, tears forming, but he did not argue. Humanity had always fought hardest when the odds were hopeless. Suddenly, Erin's voice broke across the comms, fierce and proud. "Captain Vey, our ships will hold the swarm. You strike the heart. Humanity began this stand. It is right that you finish it." Mara's breath caught. Allies, once doubtful, now trusted them with the final blow. She raised her head high. "Acknowledged. The Resolute will end this." The crew stiffened, their fear burning into courage. They had been battered, broken, but not defeated. If this was their last battle, they would make it count. The Resolute surged forward, flames trailing from its ruined hull. Every gun fired, every torpedo launched. The ship tore through the swarm, cutting a bloody path toward the Harbinger's heart. Inside, the crew felt the weight of every lost friend. Torres, Karine, the countless others who had fallen, they were all with them now. Their sacrifices gave strength to every strike. Jonas shouted through the chaos, "Direct hit on its core plating! One more push!" Mara clenched her fist. "All power to forward cannons! Give it everything!" The ship's last reserves poured into the weapons. Light blazed like a newborn star, ripping into the Harbinger's chest. The dark core screamed, cracking, pulsing with unstable energy. But the Krith fought back. A spear of shadow lanced through the Resolute, tearing decks apart. Fires consumed whole sections. People screamed as bulkheads collapsed. The ship shook as if dying. Jonas gasped, "We can't take another hit." Mara's voice steadied. "Then we don't give them one." In the burning halls, crew members dragged the wounded, refusing to leave anyone behind. Some sealed off breaches with their own bodies. Their courage was raw, messy, human. It was not perfect, but it was unstoppable. In that chaos, something strange began to happen. The Krith's swarm faltered. Their perfect unity wavered, as if the fire of human defiance confused them. The monsters, built only for obedience, could not understand sacrifice without gain, hope without reason. And in that hesitation, humanity struck. The Resolute's final salvo tore through the core. The Harbinger convulsed, its monstrous body splitting, open. The vortex began to collapse inward, dragging the Krith swarm with it. Ships fled from the pull of destruction. Allied fleets scattered, engines burning at maximum. On the Resolute, the bridge shook violently. Sparks flew, panels exploded. Jonas screamed, "We're caught in the pull!" Mara stood tall, refusing to leave her post. "Hold steady. If this is the end, let it be an end they will never forget." But then, something unexpected happened. Allied ships turned back. Zalarian wings locked formation around the Resolute. Draconian cruisers fired their engines, pushing against the pull. Dozens of ships, battered and broken, linked themselves to the humans with tractor beams and energy tethers. Erin's voice roared over comms. "You lit the fire, humans. We will not let it go out." Together, they pulled. The vortex collapsed, consuming the Harbinger and its swarm. Darkness screamed and vanished into silence. The system trembled, but the light of stars returned. When the shaking ended, the battlefield was quiet. The Resolute floated among wreckage, nearly destroyed, but alive. Its crew, bloodied and exhausted, looked out at the silent void. For the first time in memory, the Krith were gone. On the bridge, Jonas collapsed into his chair, tears streaming freely. We actually did it." Mara placed a hand on his shoulder. Her voice was soft, carrying both grief and pride. "Not just us. All of us. Humanity showed the way. But together we stood. Across the fleet, cheers and cries filled the comms. Species that once distrusted one another now celebrated side by side. The impossible had been done. Mara looked out into the endless stars. The war was not over. The Krith would return, somewhere, sometime. But they had been wounded. More importantly, the galaxy had changed. No one would ever look at humanity as weak again. Not after this. She whispered, almost to herself, "They thought we were fragile. They thought we would break. But we are human. We endure. We rise." The stars glittered in silence, as if listening, and in that moment, the galaxy understood a truth it would never forget. When all others bowed, humanity stood.